Good afternoon. My name is Ahmed. I'm with the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Today, Canada will have the opportunity to hear from someone who has truly exemplified what it means to be a Canadian. Over the interest of their own life and safety, they have chosen to brave the most dangerous place on earth today to play their part in truly encapsulating what has taken place in Gaza for the past 6 months. For 5 months, Mansour Shouman willingly chose to stay in Gaza after being given the chance to return to his country to report as a citizen journalist the countless number of atrocities and war crimes perpetuated against all people in Gaza. Palestinians, reporters, and forward aid workers, everyone. Canadian Muslims have been clear. Our government simply has not been doing enough to put a stop to the carnage that has gripped Gaza for over a year and a half now. While the passing of the NDP motion was a welcome change, more than ever, our government must begin taking steps toward real change. Therefore, we reiterate our calls for the government to firstly impose Magnitsky and IRPA sanctions on the Netanyahu war cabinet in response to their clear contraventions of international law, including UN Security Council Resolution 2728. Also, recruitment by the IDF on Canadian soil must end while this war rages on. Canadians cannot be allowed to participate in an army that is engaged in active war crimes. And finally, after the killing of the Canadian aid worker in Gaza, Canada must summon its ambassador in Israel, just as the United Kingdom did. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Shouman, who will share his thoughts and call to action for our government to take actionable steps in ending what the United Nations has called a plausible genocide. Mr. Shouman.
Thank you, Ahmed. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mansour Shouman. I'm an engineer by trade. I also have an MBA. I've worked in consulting, both in the public and in the private sector. However, for the past 6 months, I have been a citizen journalist and a charity aid worker. I am a Canadian citizen who has lived in Gaza for over 2 years now. I would like to begin by painting a mental picture of what Gaza was like before the murder of 15,000 children in a span of 6 months, the arbitrary detention of hundreds of men and boys and stripping them down to their underwear to be humiliated, the complete displacement of an entire population of 1.8 million people before the complete blockade of all food, water, electricity and fuel. For decades, Gaza has struggled under an illegal military occupation. It was described as the largest open-air prison in the world. It has been under a blockade that crippled an economy that held an unemployment rate of over 80%, despite the education rate being over 96%. Even the daily calorie intake of Palestinians in Gaza has been controlled, all in an effort to keep the entire population on the brink of collapse. This has been going on for 2 decades. So to be clear, life was never easy in Gaza. But what I have witnessed for the past few months during my time there is an indescribable, never-ending nightmare. I stand before you today on Canada's national stage as one of the precious few Canadians who were able to escape. My family was able to leave in November, but many other Canadians are still there, trapped. During my time in Gaza, my aim was to accurately capture the truth that this war is not about eliminating Hamas or rescuing hostages. Rather, it is a deliberate attempt to collectively punish an entire population living in Gaza, regardless of who they are. Whether they be civilians or foreign aid workers, the IDF's objectives has been total devastation. If you don't believe me, that's okay. You don't have to take my word for it. You can simply read the same genocidal statements uttered by Israeli ministers. After months of watching our country and the entire international community tiptoe around which solutions will lead to peace and justice, I am utterly disgusted. I am disgusted at the international community, its failure to stop what I will not hesitate to describe as a genocide, regardless of any technicality. I am disgusted that internationally our leaders have been so desensitized by the footage that they have found comfort in opting for soft diplomacy rather than tangible actions. Clearly, the international community can justify the killing of 86 children per day, not to speak of the countless massacres of men, women, elderly. Either our international leaders can justify it or they simply do not care. I stand before you today as a witness to the most horrific carnage, the worst man-made human catastrophe our world has seen in decades, to call a spade a spade. A United Nations resolution vote to call for a ceasefire is not enough. Who are we fooling? When has a catastrophe of this magnitude ever been solved through symbolic resolutions? We need action and accountability. That is the only way we can stop this carnage. We must hold this genocidal Netanyahu Israeli regime government accountable for its war crimes. And as a Canadian citizen, I am calling on my country to take this step first. Our country must, 1. Impose directed Magnitsky and IRPA sanctions on the Netanyahu war cabinet in response to their clear contraventions of international law, including UN Security Council Resolution 2728. Number 2, ban recruitment by the Israeli Defense Forces on Canadian soil must end now. Canadians cannot be allowed to participate in an army that is engaged in active war crimes. It does not matter if a country is a superpower, a middle power, or has no power at all. Every country has a responsibility to do their part. To do their part in stopping a massacre of this magnitude. And every country that calls itself an ally of Israel must hold its ally accountable, especially Canada. While our country and the international community's lack of action in stopping this war is unforgivable, we have a chance to stop 40,000 deaths from becoming 80,000 or even worse. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming today.